youragedge.com into your browser. You'll find Traveling the Bluegrass uncut stories in long form, so you don't miss a thing. You'll also find lots of ag news and farm pictures from across the Commonwealth. You can also find all the Kentucky communities that Traveling the Bluegrass can be found. Remember to visit youragedge.com.
Have you been to Big Deal Store yet? Go to WPKYOnline.com and click on Loyal Listener Big Deals. The other day, I redeemed a gift certificate on my smartphone. It was so easy. Thanks to Loyal Listener Big Deals, I found new places to eat, have fun, take the family out, and get my car fixed. With Loyal Listener Big Deals, you can save money and try new businesses. Go to WPKYOnline.com. But you better hurry. You never know how long each deal will last.
Grab your cup and settle in. It's time for Coffee Talk with Tess, filled to the brim with stories, guests, and information that affects us all right here at home. Have a question for one of our guests? Email Tess at WPKYOnline@gmail.com. Now, let's go live to the WPKY studios and see who dropped by this morning.
Oh, well, I would say just you wait and see. It's a surprise, but I've been tattling all morning because I was excited. So Chief Francis is here with us. Of course, we don't do anything on Coffee Talk, though, until we start with our Pledge of Allegiance. So here you go. Get on your feet. Are they not the cutest things in the whole wide world? I love that. If you want your kids to kick us off on Coffee Talk, all you've got to do is record that on your phone and send it to us. You can text it 270-963-9038, or you can email it to us at WPKYOnline@gmail.com. I mean, you could get some of them folks over to Firehouse to do that.
Well, I guess we could.
I mean, David Sullinger, I think that'd be a great person to pick on. I like picking on him.
Oh, yeah. He's a lot of fun.
I hollered at Chief Francis. Of course, if you don't know, Princeton Fire Department, this is our chief. This is Brent Francis. And I said, we started thinking about all of the storms that were moving in this week. And one of the things that we had saw, I guess over the last few weeks, and it happened just the other day too, are these poles catching on fire. And I don't know how many times I've heard, now what in the world's causing, poles? And we saw it during the ice storm. Mm-hmm. What causes that?
Well, one of the poles that was on fire the other day, I believe they thought the insulator, it was actually out in the county, the insulator had, something had happened to it and allowed it to energize the bolt through the cross arm that goes through the pole, and then the bolt set the pole on fire. That's what they were thinking maybe was going on up there, and then the limb, probably a lot of it is damage from trees or limbs, hitting the lines or falling on the lines, and then every now and then animals will short them out. Squirrels, birds, big birds, like buzzards or hawks.
There is always a squirrel involved, isn't there?
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Squirrels are notorious. There's probably no telling how much trouble squirrels have caused linemen over the years.
I'm telling you, they're cute, but boy, they can be the devil themselves.
And a few times, the critter that gets in the lines will be on fire when it hits the ground, and then cause a grass fire to get started.
Well, and that's my biggest question was, like, especially when we lose power, I've heard you're supposed to shut off the breaker box. You're not supposed to do it. If you don't, then it could cause a fire in your own house when it comes back on. What is the truth to that matter?
Well, one of the things that can be very dangerous for first responders and linemen as well is when we have a power outage, if someone tries to hook a generator up and they don't turn the switch off on their breaker box and try to hook their generator in to their house, it can go back out onto the lines and back to the transformer. And a lot of people don't understand, the transformer, I think it's about 7,200 volts running on the normal lines, out the distribution lines. The transformers step that down to 120 to go into your house, or 220 or something. I'm not an expert on that. The linemen are probably cringing a little out there. But anyway, the transformers step that down to household current to go into your house. Well, the transformers have the ability to step it back up if you back feed it from your house or your business with a generator. It can step it back up when it goes back through that transformer and put it back out at 7,200 volts on the lines. And so when people think the line is dead, and then somebody turns the generator on and don't throw the switch that prevents it from going back out onto the line, because it'll go both ways, that can get people in trouble. Sometimes a line that can be dead, nobody's done anything to fix it, and somebody hooks the generator up and don't throw the main switch, and it allows that power to go back out up to that transformer.
Well, and that's one of those things, and I told him last night, I was like, because I always say I want Brent to come in here and explain it to my blonde self, because I know I'm not the only one that doesn't understand that.
Yeah.
And especially after the ice storm, and I thought, you know what, we've got a chance, especially after an ice storm. Now we've got some spring weather coming in, at those limbs being dislodged and our power being out, intermittently. And I wanted to know what the deal with that was, because I've heard you're supposed to turn it off, you're not supposed to turn it off. You're worried about it feeding back and all of that stuff. So, and it's a generator thing.
Yeah, and some people will have like a professional generator installed,
Right.
That will kick on automatically and things like that. Now, I'm sure with those systems, and they're not going to backfeed out like somebody just getting a generator, starting it.
Well, it's set up for that,
trying to rig it themselves, to run some stuff in their house.
I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, but that's why it's never a good idea to touch a power line. It may be dead right now, but it may have power back on it from a multitude of possibilities.
Right.
A minute from now. And so you touched it a minute ago and didn't get electrocuted, and then it's hot and nobody knows it for whatever reason. So it's never a good idea to touch a power line.
So let's say we lose power, and I say, you know what, I'm going to have to keep this refrigerator cold. There's a couple of things that I need to plug into the generator. Maybe I just want to run the TV because Grey's Anatomy's on and I can't not watch it. I mean, it could be. Don't look at me that way, preacher. I see you. But if I plug that in, do I need to go just completely unplug the plug and plug it straight into the generator?
Well, if you do that, there's not an issue. It's when you try to power your whole house up through your breaker panel or something that you can backfeed out into the system. If you just,
as long as you're not messing with the main line,
if you try to energize your house with a generator, you have to throw the main switch to prevent it from coming back out on the lines.
Now, that makes more sense. Now, what happened now when the power does go out? Does it behoove me to turn my power off before it comes back on for surges and stuff like that?
Well, it would help you to turn a lot of your big power appliances off, maybe where it doesn't surge when it comes back on, like. Maybe your air conditioner if it's in the summertime.
Well, that's one of the things I was wondering about.
It shouldn't hurt anything if you're not at home, when the power goes out and then it comes back on. But I always like to turn things off before.
It's the shouldn't.
Yeah, before you come back so it doesn't have a big load. It may not really hurt anything that I know of, but I'll do that a lot of times, turn things off.
Well, I've seen some wires and some things really, kind of fried, from it coming back through when they first turned the power
Now,
on.
a business that's pulling a lot of power on big machinery and stuff like that, they, a lot of things, once you lose power, they may not come back on automatically, till you turn them back on. But it's one of the main things when the power goes out, especially if it's going to be out for several hours or a day, is we've had people start setting stuff on the stove, or something may get moved in front of an electric heater in the wintertime, because if the power has been out for a day or two, and if that electric heater is still on when the power comes back on, then it's going to be on.
I didn't think about
And
that.
so we've had, especially after the 2009 ice storm, when they would re-energize a section of town, there would be a fire a lot of times where somebody had set something on an electric stove and didn't realize the eye was on when the power went out, maybe. So they didn't turn it off because they didn't realize, that, and then they forgot. And when the power come on, then that eye come on and there's something setting on it. Or there's something gets moved in front of a electric heater or a space heater or something like that.
Well, especially right now, a lot of us still got them space heaters and different. Not me personally.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't do something like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, a lot of us have still got those out because it's still cold at night.
And so you got to remember kind of what was on when the power went off, and you should turn it off, especially if heating devices
Just
or
go around the
stoves
house and
things
make
like
sure,
that.
right?
Yeah, make sure everything's off. And then it's never a good idea to set anything on the stove,
Right.
anything combustible on the stove, for a multitude of reasons, that being one of them.
Well, and when the power goes out, the other thing, I know that some of us have got like pilot lights and different things like that on our gas. I mean, when the power goes out, does that affect any of that at all?
Well, the pilot lights should stay lit.
Okay.
Now, a lot of times, if you've got a blower that blows the heat, then it's not going to come on because the blower doesn't have electricity to it to remove the heat from
Right.
the furnace. So it's going to prevent it from coming on. Some gas logs will continue to burn that don't need electricity, that don't have blowers and things like that. That's one of the advantages maybe of having gas logs. If you have a power outage, you can still have some heat. So, but just don't ever set anything. I mean, it's never been a good idea to put a rug over a floor furnace, for instance, through the summer. A lot of people leave. There's not that many floor furnaces out there anymore, but they used to cause a lot of runs for us.
Yeah.
The pilot light usually is left on because, it's a little bit of a chore to light it, in the fall. And it helps keep moisture out of that area, which prevents rusting from the draft diverter and the floor furnace itself. So, the thermostat's turned down, but as soon as it gets cold enough in the fall to kick the furnace on, if you haven't removed the rug from the floor furnace, then, you've got a serious problem.
Well, and that's one of those things, I hope that we don't lose power, and I hope that we don't get, sad enough. But when they're talking about 47-mile-an-hour wind gust, we're under a wind advisory for tomorrow. It's not going to take much to dislodge some of those limbs that are left over, or maybe, shaky anyway from the ice storm. That could cause a power outage pretty easy.
And the utility companies, they do a fantastic job of checking their stuff, but it's hard for them to know. There might be a pole that say has been cracked from a strong wind event, and you can't even tell it's been cracked, because of maybe swaying, or a tree limb may have fell into the wires, or there may have been a car wreck 2 or 3 poles down that shook
Squirrel.
everything, hit a pole, and so there's some poles out there that probably need to be changed out, but nobody knows it, and they're good about inspecting them. A lot of them, I think, inspect their poles, even hire other companies to inspect their poles, to try to make sure that there's not one out there that's cracked or weak or about to fall. But sure, anytime the wind's going to blow like that, and I saw that on the news too, and I thought, boy, there'll be some issues.
Well, that's exactly what that come to mind as soon as I saw the wind advisory pop up.
If there's a weak pole out there, that wind will probably find it.
Well, it's a good time to just go over some of that stuff
and
too.
there's a lot of stress on those poles. A lot of weight on them, and those power lines it's a lot of stress and wear and tear on those poles.
Well, now look, we've got a lot of poles out in the county that really affect what goes on even in town. So I mean, there's all with everybody connected. That it just kind of one creates a problem for the other. So if we can pay attention to that kind of stuff, what else do we need? Like if our power goes out, now number one, don't freak out. But it's a good time to make sure your batteries are up in whatever radio you're using, or weather radio, or whatever you're doing.
Yes, especially if you live out in the county. The rural electric providers have a big issue and a big challenge in all the trees that are around their power lines running through the country. And there will be some trees that are going to blow over. And there will be some power outages. I mean,
Welcome
almost
to
guaranteed.
Farmersville.
So why wait until you're in the dark to start looking for flashlights and batteries and lanterns? There's all kinds of neat little LED lanterns. And the batteries have made such progress, as far as staying up for a long time before they run down just because of age. And so check all that stuff and have some lights ready, and be ready, be prepared for the power outages that are probably going to come.
Well, and I'll tell you, the first thing I thought of too when they said the wind, I was like, oh, God bless them, boy. Here we go. And it's. Don't get me wrong, it's spring and everybody's thinking about cleaning up their yard. We've got extra stuff, to get rid of from the ice storm, tornado stuff. You know where I'm going with that. The wind starts blowing, hello spring, but that means hello field fires and things get out of hand.
And today may be all right, the conditions may be all right today to decide you're going to burn something, but they're not going to be good tomorrow. That's for sure. So, and time again, people say, well, I thought that fire was out. I thought it had burned up. But a 40-mile-an-hour wind, 50-mile-an-hour wind is going to stoke that fire back up. If it's not completely out and cold, there's a lot of times there's some hot coals left in the very bottom.
I just started to ask.
Under the ashes. And that wind will blow that off and get it stoked back up and then blow those sparks off and start a grass fire from piles that people thought had already burn up.
Well, how do we make sure they're out? I mean, what is the best way to do?
Wet it down. The only way to make absolutely certain that it's out would be to stir it up and wet it down. And if it's just all a pile of small little limbs or a pile of leaves, then you're going to know it's pretty much out. It's when you've got bigger pieces of wood in it, or a lot of people try to burn a stump out. We talked about that before. Put everything on a stump.
Yeah.
Well, that stump may burn for a week or longer, in under those ashes. And then you get a day where there's a 40-mile-an-hour wind and it's blowing sparks out of that stump. It'll blow all the ashes off the top of it. I mean, I've seen stumps burn through a rain, still be burning after a rain, under the ashes and things like that, or big logs. Same way, it'll get up in the log where it's kind of protected from the rain. And then when the wind blows, and it may burn for days before it consumes the log or finally goes out.
And it may take you a few extra minutes to rake it out and really kind of douse it.
Don't start a big pile that's got big stuff in it today, because tomorrow you're going to wish you hadn't, if it's not burnt completely up.
See, that's good advice, too. It's not just about what's going on today when you go and set it.
You need to look at the
forecast.
Today.
Right.
Yes, especially on the bigger piles. Look at the forecast. Another thing that people don't realize is how easy it is to melt vinyl siding. A lot of homes have vinyl siding on them. And if your pile is too close to that vinyl siding, I mean, I've seen vinyl siding melted off of buildings multiple times over the years, and the bushes won't even have the leaves curled up on them, underneath. So the eave of the house can catch heat, under the eave.
That.
And especially if it's a side of the house that the sun's already shining on. And if it's in the summertime and an 85-degree day and the sun's hitting that house good and you start a fire, it doesn't take a whole lot of extra heat, and you'll be curling and melting and warping your vinyl siding.
Now, see, this is what I love about this guy, because I don't know how many times Brent Francis has been here. We've never talked about that.
Well, I don't think we have. But vinyl siding's a lot easier to melt than you think. I've stopped before on the road. I'd see somebody starting a big pile that I knew was too close to the vinyl. And I would stop and tell them, I said, can you, one time a person was burning an old outbuilding next to their house. It was just over in another county. And it was just beginning to take off good. And I stopped and I said, is your siding vinyl or aluminum? And they said, it's vinyl. I said, you better call the fire department right now. It was way beyond their ability to put that building out. I said, you're fixing to melt the vinyl siding off your house. We walked around there, and it was already melting. So people
you just don't
realize,
think about things like that. I don't know that I would. Yeah. I mean, that's...
And you should never start a fire that you can't control. That's another thing. For a fire really to be legal, you've got to be able to keep it under your control at all times, which means a garden hose. You could have 5-gallon buckets, stage several 5-gallon buckets of water, 4-gallon backpack sprayers. But now they're not going to handle a very large fire. But for a fire to be legal, you need to be able to have it under control. And a lot of times, like farmers and construction people, they'll have a dozer or something out there. Well, that's how they're going to control that fire, or a tractor and a disc, if they're going to be burning, where they'll disc around it to keep it from spreading out.
Kind of a ring there.
And but you need to watch it, and then a big pile, don't start it today because the weather's not going to be good for tomorrow, and you're probably going to be having to use that tractor and disc or that dozer.
As many times as I've talked to him, I would not think about what the weather's going to do tomorrow, really and truly.
Yeah.
I really wouldn't.
Depending on the size of the pile, you may need to go out more than tomorrow. You may need to have a week of good weather. It may take a week for some of these big piles to
We've got some big
up.
piles that are going on, too. Well, and when we start up our lawnmowers and our weed eaters and, some of the blowers especially, that stuff, some of them's got some mouse nest from over the winter.
Yeah.
And when you start running them and they get hot,
then
there
you got
it
a little
goes.
fire from that.
Well, how do we put that out if it's on an engine?
You need to check. Just look under the hood of the mower or whatever. I got a mower out to myself just last weekend and raised the hood. The gas line was turned off, but there was a big nest, on the engine. So was able to get that out before you start it. But look in the mowers and things like that. Make sure there's not a nest built on the muffler.
Last year we had mouse. I swear to you, on that lawnmower, they had built condominiums in there. And they'll take years where it seems like it's worse. In this year, it seems like the ladybugs are kind of really collecting in those fuse boxes, especially out in the buildings. And, some of the mouse, here goes the mouse condo. So, when we do get to that point, and now the fire department's there, this is the other part that I told Brent I wanted to go over. Don't run over the water hoses.
Yeah, the fire hoses, especially our supply hoses. Our supply hoses are 5-inch hoses, and they're smaller cars don't have the clearance, for one thing, to get over the hose without dragging the bottom of the car over the hose. So if you rip one of those hoses open, by driving over it, it can, shut down our firefighting operation. The couplings, it's been a while since I've measured one, but it may actually be like 8 inches high, the coupling.
Wow.
8 or 9 inches high. So you're liable to damage your car. Of course, they're round and they have to connect, and if you warp them or egg shape them by running over them, then that ruins the hose. And a section of 5-inch hose costs about $600 or $700.
Oh, wow.
So just one section, and if you warp
That's a high-dollar garden hose.
Well, warped a coupling, that'll run 2 sections of hose. Because you've got the male and female ends for 2 different sections that are warped, and then it water hammers our pump. If your vehicle runs over the hose and your vehicle is heavy enough to pinch the water supply off, it water hammers the water lines that run under the ground because you're flowing water. Water weighs 8.3 pounds per gallon. That 5-inch hose has a gallon for every foot. So 500 gallons of water it takes 500 gallons of water just to fill 500 feet of 5-inch hose. And that's moving. So if you run over that hose and pinch it off, it overpressurizes all the way back through the ground, through the fire hydrant, through the ground on the water pipes in the ground, and can bust the water pipes underground. And then the water department's got to come dig it up and fix the water pipe.
I would have never. I swear, I look at him half the time when he's here with my mouth hanging open going, really?
Well, and because moving large volumes of water like that, there's a lot of weight and a lot of pressure involved. And so you increase the pressure a tremendous amount when you pinch it off. And then when you let it go, it creates a vacuum. So you're just expanding and then contracting that water line underground. and the pump on the fire truck. You know, a pump on a fire truck is going to cost $70,000, and you can bust the seals in a pump on a fire truck.
Oh, by just not running over it.
By running over it, because by the same token, that water's moving through that fire pump and through our smaller lines and nozzles, and if you pinch it off, and of course it water hammers, well, that's building pressure. Well, when you drive off of it, well, here comes that pressure, and it slams back into the fire pump on the other end. So you overpressurize, and then you create vacuums on both sides when you run over a fire hose like that. That's moving a lot of
That's a
water.
lot.
Yeah.
Well, and then when, like not too long ago, some of this is I guess, fresh on my mind because of the fire that we had not too long ago, down at near Legion.
Yeah, we had to
Drive.
lay a lot of line to get enough water from two different directions.
There
and
were
that
hoses
caused
everywhere.
a lot of traffic issues having to lay those lines along the way.
Well, a part of that is there were folks that were wanting to drive awfully close to that, just had to go by, stop it.
Yeah.
I mean, you ain't got to drive that close to that fire. So what is a safe distance?
Well,
I mean, because there's reasons that's their safety as well.
yes. We try to make that hose last for 20 years, and it's not going to last if people are running over it, and damaging it. Not to mention all the water hammer factors we just talked about, and supply issues. And, a firefighter on a ladder with a hand line, if you pinch that water off and it stops, then they lose that. There's a lot of back force on that line. So if it goes dead all of a sudden, it's liable to make you fall off a ladder or knock you down. And then when the pressure comes back, it's gonna let you fall forward if you pinch it off, and then it's gonna knock you backwards when it comes back at you.
I'm gonna tell you what, the gentleman that I saw hovering above the fire on the ladder, you don't need to be pinching off nothing that he's got up there.
You would be surprised when you start that waterway on the end of that aerial, if it's up at full extension. That water will push that ladder a foot or two. It'll move it a foot or two when that water comes up.
I bet.
Pushing. And then when you shut it off, it'll let it down, and then it'll raise it back. It'll shake that ladder pretty good.
Well, and he's in a position that I would not want to be in to begin with. I mean, you talk about precarious. I don't think that quite cuts what that is.
Yeah, so there's a lot of forces involved in moving water at high pressures like that.
Well, and that I did want to add too before you left. Now there was a mention of red hats. Can you explain what that is?
A what now?
A red hat. That is there like?
Oh, you mean in the firefighters?
Uh-huh.
Yes, the new firefighters, what we call the rookie firefighters, wear a red helmet so we can identify. It's hard to tell who you're talking to sometimes with a SCBA on, a face mask, a helmet, a hood. I mean, you're down to just a set of eyes is about all you can see.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times when we're issuing orders and assigning tasks at an emergency scene, it's hard to tell who it is you're actually talking to. A lot of times you're going by size and shape and